Welcome! This is Her Identity Project, a safe space for women to explore faith, self-discovery, and personal growth. Here, we will journey together to become our best whole selves, spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. It's time to let go of everything that is holding you back from becoming the woman God created you to be. If you're ready to reclaim your authentic self, stick around. I'm your host, Ashley Iduda, and this is Her Identity Project. Welcome back. This is Her Identity Project podcast. I'm Ashley Iduda. I am here with Julie. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm excited for us to have this open conversation because you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit online. So thank you for being here with me. I'm going to give you a chance to just introduce yourself. So tell us just a little bit about Julie. Who's Julie?
I think that's a great question, right? Like, who is Julie? Who is Ashley? And there's like the big deep question. Well, the different roles that I play, we can look at it that way too. I'm Julie Trivedi. I live in Dallas, Texas currently. Prior to Dallas, I lived in Maryland, and I'm originally from the Northeast. So I grew up in New Jersey.
Okay.
I did my undergraduate in Philadelphia at UPenn, and then I came back to New Jersey for medical school. And as is the case for medical school journeys and training, we sometimes travel all over the place. So I moved up to Worcester, Mass, where I did my internal medicine residency training. Then I moved to the Boston area, where I did infectious diseases fellowship training. And then after that, I moved to Maryland, where I lived for about 7 years at my first job outside of training, which was at Johns Hopkins. And then I came here to Dallas, Texas. So outside of that whole physician part of myself, which is a big part, and part of where I am in my life has been to figure out who I am outside of that. So this is a really great experience here. I
I
have,
am gonna stop you
yeah,
already just because I kind
sure.
of loved what you just touched on because it really does tie in with the show. I think for me, when hear you speak about your background, it's so impressive. I think anyone would be, pretty wowed with what you've accomplished. I know you should be so proud of yourself. But I also know that as women, sometimes we can find our worth in our roles, right? So what we actually do starts to define who we are. And I know you have like a deeper story than that. And so I am excited to just unpack that. So, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point because I think that being a physician and the physician training is all consuming. I mean, it's this dream of being a doctor. I became conscious of it when I was 10. And
Really?
so like everything in my life, all of the choices that I made, whether to go out, not to go out, whether to do this thing over the summer or not do this thing over the summer, everything was towards this goal of becoming a doctor.
Wow.
Everything. Like
Yeah.
your free time and how you spend your free time. So when we think about, athletes, people who are in the Olympics, and there's this whole concept of this like 10,000 hours of training to
Yeah.
become a professional or an expert at something. It starts from when you're younger, and this is something that I talk to my girls. My younger one she's 10, so her mindset is still really open, and she's like a
Yeah.
sponge and drinks all this in. It's thinking about how we want to consciously be and the choices we make. That I tell her, I said, okay, if your dream was to be, let's say, an Olympic athlete, let's say gymnastics, how do you think that person gets to be in the Olympics? Do they wake up one day and all of a sudden they qualify for the Olympics?
Right.
Or is it intention and planning and dedication and that consistent effort that you put in towards achieving that goal. So it really like speaks to these choices, whether, and it doesn't always have to be something as big and grand as the Olympics or becoming a doctor or a lawyer. It can be anything in our lives. If you want to be a better cook in the kitchen, like you just want to make better food, what you eat and what you feed your family,
Yeah.
um, you're not going to just wake up one day and all of a sudden have all those skills downloaded in you, right? Like it's this constant practice, it's this trial and error, it's the consistency. And I say these things, I may have mastered some of this in some aspects of my life, like my profession, but there's a whole lot of aspects of my life that I have not mastered this concept, that I am still always having to remind myself every day, to make those small, gradual steps towards whatever
Yeah.
it is I'm working towards.
Yeah, there's a ton to unpack there too. I really loved how you spoke about, when you have this aspiration, you have to, speak to your daughter and say, who do you need to be to become this? Because it's not necessarily about what we're doing, it's about who do we need to be. And so that deep analysis of our character is so important, even at our age, right? To say, okay, this is where I want to be, but let's be honest about where I really am now and who I need to be, even to be the best wife or to be the best mom or to, like you said, it doesn't even have to be career wise because we have our careers, but we have our relationships too. And so our relationships are its own uh, area of interest, if you will. Right?
It's so true. It is so true.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, I think we all struggle with that aspect of life, and some of us are better at it than others. Um, that was something that I felt proud of is that I don't really have this huge career to speak of because I chose to stay at home and raise my babies. And so that affected my confidence because I couldn't sit here with someone like you a few months ago and feel confident because I didn't feel like I had anything to add to the table, so to speak. But I've realized that relationships is an area that I excel at. And so um there is beauty in really like thinking deep about, who we really are and where we want to go.
You
Um
know, and just something that you said there, uh, it sometimes the grass is always greener, right? Like we look at what someone else has, this huge career, profession, and we're thinking, "Wow, I don't have that." Or I look at it like, I wonder what it would be like to be able to be home, have that time to spend with my children
yeah.
and do those things that sometimes my career does not give me the opportunity to be able to do in the way that I want to. And I think about that, right? And I think about
Yeah.
like there was definitely times in my life like when I was newly married and, training at that point, you're like, whatever, I can pour all my stuff into this career. You figure husband's going to be there anyway, things are fine. And then
Yeah.
kids come in the picture and
Yeah.
everything changes. Everything
Yes.
changes. And I started my fellowship training, my infectious diseases fellowship training. I was 30 years old. And I started this when my daughter, my oldest, was barely 2 months old.
Wow.
And like, this is a very, very emotional part for me
Yeah.
because at that time, I was willing to like give up my whole career if I could spend that time with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't, I guess it was always an option, right? I guess I didn't think I had a choice at that time, that
Mhm.
this is the trajectory, this is the path. And if you get off that train, it's going to be that much harder for you to get back on. So if their career is really what you're wanting and this thing that you've been building towards for at that point 20 years of your life,
Absolutely.
like you're like, what do I do? What do I let go? Like what do I not let go of? What do I hold on to? How do I be? And I remember there would be days that would go by that I wouldn't see her awake because I was leaving in the morning when this isn't her first year of life. I'm leaving before she's awake and I'm coming home after she's asleep. And that would happen 3 days in a row. And this was 2008 to 2009. So, like,
Yeah.
we weren't in the Zoom world where like internet worked as fabulously as it does now, right? Where you can
Yeah.
VPN from anywhere around the world and it almost doesn't matter. Like it didn't work that way, And so it's like there was so much that I was navigating, and I remember a friend who, like, her husband was a physician, she was had trained as a physician, but, he was doing his, like, fellowship and specialty training as a surgeon, and our daughters were born 1 week apart,
Mm,
and she was able to be home for that first year with her daughter before she went and started her training, and I didn't, and I remember feeling so resentful.
yeah.
Besides all of the postpartum hormonal things that you feel, and it wasn't even an easy pregnancy, and it was a harder delivery and post-delivery complications in and out of the hospital.
My
But, like
gosh.
like, there was so much resentment there of just, like, feeling like, I wish I could have taken that time to be able to be with her and stuff like that. So, that struggle is always there.
Yeah.
Here,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, thank you for validating that. And I know you're right. And I know that there's so many women listening are going like, yes, me too, because I mean, it's so easy to get caught up in it. There was a season of my life where I did work. I'm not going to say I didn't work at all in 10 years, but my husband was like encouraging me to go work full time. And my daughter was just born, my second one. And breastfeeding was important to me and all the things. And I just said, I don't want to go work full time. Like, this is so important to me. And I said, but I'm going to do it because this is important to you. Like, fine. So I went and tried it. And I did get so laser beam focused on my job that I was just letting the babysitter like tend to her when she was sick and like had this crazy skin rash and like really needed me. But I was like, no, like they need me here. I said yes. I told them I would come to work and this is my obligation. So I was then choosing work over her. And yes, there's all the guilt, but my husband, meanwhile, was begging me to quit my job because he was like, our life's chaos now. We're used to you being home. Like we're juggling all the plates in the air. And it was a disaster. I'm not gonna lie. It was one of the hardest seasons of our married life. And um, everything works differently for different people, of course. But for us, yeah, it was just very clear that, me staying home worked better and he begged me to quit my job. He was like, "You gotta come back home." So, yeah, so we've all been there and there's no perfect, because I do know what it feels like. And so you have the guilt of working if you're not at home, and the guilt of being at home and not contributing financially if you stay at home. And I think as women, anyway, we're still expected to do so much more, regardless, like of whether we work or not. So, I mean, I think it's not easy to be a woman, just not.
Yeah. We just, like, sprout more arms and, like, an extra head and a pair of legs and, like, just there's, like, that one meme of SpongeBob where he's, like, doing it's, like, one of those GIFs, and he's got, like, 50 arms going at the same
Yeah.
time, ironing and mopping and sweeping and cooking and, like, steam coming out of his head. That's literally what it feels like sometimes. Yeah, yeah. So what's interesting is that I feel I've come to this point in my life, and I feel that the universe, God, however you want to call it,
Yeah.
uh, gives us signs that we need to start shifting how we're living our lives. And sometimes those are big signs, like, you may get into a big car accident somewhere and you're like, because you were rushing and blah, 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 right? Or it could be like a scary medical diagnosis of some sort, cancer or diabetes, whatever it may be. And sometimes there's like smaller signs along the way, you know. Um, and I really firmly believe that when we experience those things and we don't tune in to why those things are happening, we miss the lesson and we keep going until the next bigger thing is going to happen. It's like the universe's way of
Yes.
trying to shake you up and say, "Get
Yes.
your attention. Like
Yeah.
stop what you're doing. This is a disaster path that you are heading on, whether it's for your
Yes.
health, your family, or whatever it may be." Right? And last year there was a big thing that happened in our home, and it was, mental health hit teenage mental health hit our home.
Oh,
And,
wow.
yeah, and and it's hard enough when you go through something yourself. I went through my own mental health journey. I actually recently had my story published in one of our big international medical journals, Journal of American Medical Association. It was like my own, it's a narrative piece, and it's called Redefining
Congratulations.
Resilience.
Yeah, I
Thank
saw
you.
that.
It was a week ago that it was published, or 2 weeks now almost. Um, and what's interesting is that it was pretty much like 6 years to the day when my own life crumbled inside. And basically, it's my story of me getting help for myself. I admitted myself to the hospital
Did you?
and took 2.5 months off from work to take FMLA. And I did all of this partial hospitalization
Wow.
program, therapy, intensive outpatient therapy. And so for me, it was a big wake up call. It was like a month after my divorce was finalized. I had been living here a year and a half in Dallas, raising my girls on my own. My mom would come in and out and help. Like she would fly in and out of town. I had no family around here in the area. And, and it was just like the pressure of all of it. You see those demos of buildings just imploding because
Yeah.
that's exactly how I felt. Like, when people say, well, just put yourself back together. I'm like, there was nothing to put
No.
together. Dust, like dust inside.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so much to say about that. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think because you were talking about how we get these little signs until it's huge, and then there's nothing we can do about it except kind of break and collapse. And that weight is so heavy. I mean, when you're actually in it, I think you can only relate if you've experienced it. I think many of us go through a period of life where we just feel so beat down by each thing, and then there's another thing and then another thing, and you can't go anymore. It's like literally wellness wise, physically your body shuts down. I mean, your body won't
Yeah.
continue anymore. So I can relate to you. That happened to me, I think, about a year and a half ago. This is kind of my like phoenix rising out of all of that, right? Is the birth of this podcast because, I had tried to work as a kindergarten teacher, which was so beautiful for my heart, but like, I don't know, just like the wrong fit for me. I don't want to sit here and elaborate too much, but yeah, 29 to 31, 5 and 6 year olds, like all needing your attention at once. There were days where I was alone with that. I mean, it was just too much. And so I would come home, I mean, not okay. Like, really, though, like, I couldn't think. I was like tapped out, like physically, like, I didn't want anyone to touch me. I didn't have any patience. Like, I couldn't think straight. I couldn't care about myself. I mean, screw
Yeah.
my needs. Like, it was like, I felt like a carcass of a person or something. And the saddest thing is I wasn't there emotionally for my daughter. It it ruined our relationship for us for, I think, God, a short amount of time. I'm repairing it as we speak, but I couldn't be there for her when she needed me. She's ADHD, and at that time she was undiagnosed, and so she also was at a grade that she wasn't really ready for. So she had so much expectations put on her, and when I don't think she was ready. And after school, she had hours of homework at that age. And so she would need me to be the peace, like the calm to her storm. And I was my own storm. Like there was no calm, you know? So we were like two hurricanes,
Yeah.
power struggle, and they say like whatever, 13 going on 30. I mean, she was only 5 at the time, but I can only imagine what you've gone through with your baby. I mean, because mental health is,
No
a
joke. Yep.
topic I'm sure you could shed a lot of light on for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, when all of this happened with me, my older one, she was like 10. And I just remember like, just with the whole life change, the whole family situation dynamic change, and the school environment we were in was very different than what we were
Yes.
used to. And here, all the kids were like a year older in the same grade because that's what happens here in Texas compared to where we were in Maryland,
Yeah.
and there was just a lot. And I have to I always have to remember to give myself grace
Yeah.
as I speak because, there will still be visions that come up in my mind when I talk about it of how I showed up in ways that I'm honestly not proud of, of the way I would yell or scream or shout. And I just think that that's just a reflection of the state that I myself was in. And so I
Yeah.
had to do my own work. And a lot of that work that I did after the therapy part actually led me to coaching. So I'm a coach, I'm a certified coach, life and leadership, personal wellness. Wellness is like right up there. Well-being. I like to say well-being more than wellness. It's right up there. And last year, my older one, she's a junior in high school now, but she was a sophomore, and she went through a huge mental health crisis. And part of it was dealing with the demands and pressures of school, the ADHD portion of it, the anxiety that comes from trying to keep up. And when you have ADHD, and it's just everything is spiraling out. And the biggest lessons for me, I consider this a really big gift. Like, she went through a lot of pain, and it's not that part, but it's the part that it allowed me a couple of things. One, it taught me how to reprioritize what was important in my life. And that, in whatever job you have, they will always, and I say they as a collective, they will always want more. They will always want more of you, but you can be replaced in that job. You cannot be replaced in your home and in the role that you
Exactly.
play with your family. And so it required me to step back a lot from taking on, like, whatever the schedule I was scheduled to work for the medical, seeing patients, as
Yeah.
well as my administrative stuff that I was doing. I needed to step back from some of that stuff. And that was one big thing. Number two, because I was like, I needed to make sure that I was in a good place so that I could be there for her the way
Exactly.
she needed me to be there for her. Right.
Yeah.
And that process is always evolving because, like, teenagers, it's like the winter weather, like the weather that changes, like
Oh my
they
God.
change, they grow, they regress, they grow. Like, you have no idea sometimes
I don't
what's
want to
going on.
know. I don't want to know. My
That's a whole
oldest
nother
is
podcast.
10. Yes, it is. I know it is. Yeah, my oldest is 10. I'm getting just a taste of it right now, like just a taste. And I am like, what's happening? Like, who is this kid? Well, how do I navigate this? I mean, yeah. So,
Yeah. Yes, yes. A book that was recommended, and I'll be honest, I haven't even read the book yet, but I know I need to read the book.
yeah.
It's called Untangled, and it's really about a girl's journey towards gaining that independence, and like you're gonna see this push-pull of, like, wanting you and not wanting you,
Oh, yeah.
listening to you, but resisting, And so it's really about, like, how they start to create that little bit of that separation to build who they are and figure out what they are. So it's called Untangled.
Okay.
So definitely a book
I'll
that,
check it out.
I need to read. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
We
and the
both need to
third
read it.
thing, yeah, the third, exactly. The third thing that came up was this mental health crisis allowed my ex and I to figure out how to co-parent more effectively.
Wow.
So there's a lot of gifts that came out of this mental health journey, but all of those that could have just bypassed and continued working the way I was working and ignoring and just then building and being more angry and resentful that I've got to do
Yeah.
it all myself and I'm trying to keep all these plates spinning and everything like that. Um, so that was a big wake up call and what that also helped me to realize was how I wanna be like, what is the role that I wanna play in my family? It helped me to realize I'm like, "Wow, my daughter's got now, at this point, a year and a half before she goes to college." And I'm like, "I've got so much to teach you about the world."
Uh,
You know?
yes.
Like, before you go off into the world, like, there's so much I want you to know and learn and how
Oh,
to be and then there's also realizing that there is no way I would be able to teach you
yeah.
everything. It's like the hardest birthday I think for me was turning 29 because it was like knowing that 30 was around the corner.
Yeah.
And at that age, now you're like 30, whatever. But like when you're when you're in your 20s and you're like, "Oh my god, I'm going to be 30 years old." Like 29 was
Yes.
the hardest thing. So it's like the year and the time leading up to that thing you're dreading sometimes is the harder part of the journey than the
Mhm.
actual arriving at that.
Yeah, it's almost like the expectations we put on ourselves for that moment in time. Like I should be this by the time I'm this age, and I should be doing this, and I should be doing that, you know. And the
That should
disappointment that
work.
can come if you're not. Yeah,
Yeah.
and again, it takes us full circle to just being, you know.
Mhm.
I think there is so much beauty in being able to just acknowledge the present and the gifts of the present instead of worrying about the future and preparing and just feeling not enough in so many different ways instead of trusting that, God has a plan and that if we just kind of surrender to his plan, then like
Said
he's
it.
gonna work it out.
You said it. This word was just like circulating, like, and we're talking about this, and it was like surrender. And I was just coaching a client yesterday, and I talked about this, and her faith is important to her too. And
Yeah.
we are all, maybe not everyone, fine. I'm guilty of this, where you surrender, but you surrender theoretically, and you
Yeah.
still keep worrying about it and like trying to figure it out. And then you're like, but God, I surrender this to you. And then you're like, are you really?
Yeah.
Are you really? Is that what surrender looks like to you, Julie? And you're like, no, yes, no.
I think I can relate so much because during this inner healing journey I've been on, I realized that I'm a control freak. And it's like, I don't think that, like, I don't know. I used to argue with my husband, and he used to say, like, you're a control freak. And I would be like, no, you're the control freak, And then it's so funny because our kids are like, both very controlling and I'm just like they don't stand a chance. I mean, I think between me and him, it's like we're both just stubborn and all the things. So, just human nature is so funny because that desire to have control over things is real. And I can only speak for myself, but it's fear-based. I think for me, it's not knowing it just feeling like I need to be in control because if I'm in control, then I know it's going to happen or whatever. And so it's one thing to say, like, yes, surrender, but it's quite another to like actually do it. Yes, I hear you.
100%, 100%. And that's exactly what I was journaling about this morning because I know there's things that I need to do to help grow my coaching business. I know I need to put myself out there, and
Yes.
yet I don't do it. And part of the not doing it is because of the fear of the uncertainty of how things may turn out. for better or worse, right? Like we can always think about the worst part, but you're like, what if this does go over well? Well, whatever, right? Like then there's other decisions that you're going to have to make. But it's that unknowing and that uncertainty that all ties back to control because we don't necessarily control the outcome. So your area of control is by choosing to not take action.
Right.
Right. So when we say like, fine, well, I'm not going to take action. If I don't take action, then whatever outcome, whichever way it may be, will never happen.
Yeah.
And that's how we sabotage ourselves too,
Yeah.
where we get in our own.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really scary to put yourself out there. I'm in the same boat. I mean, doing this podcast and kind of jumping in as like a beauty influencer. It's like I'll even record something and keep it in my phone and like not post it because I'm too worried that it's not enough. Not enough
Yeah.
what? I don't know, but it's just simply like what is it about being our most raw, authentic selves and putting it out there for people? And so it's been a journey for me. I'm trying to kick that spirit out of my life, right? Like that whole perfectionism, things have to be perfect for me to, I need to present myself a certain way, like all of that. It doesn't serve us. It
No,
doesn't serve us at all.
mm-mm. It does not. Nope.
Yeah.
The perfectionism ties into procrastination. And I was in a session yesterday and said, perfectionism and procrastination are going to keep you from your passion. And
Every time.
every time, exactly, every time. And it's about taking imperfect action
Yeah.
and just taking the step. And I think that's where surrender can also tie in that, you know, God needs us to show up, right? He needs us to show up and then he takes care of the rest, right? It's like
Yes.
take one step towards me and I'll take 1,000 steps towards you. Like, but if we don't take that first step, nothing is going to come to us on a silver platter, you know?
Yes. Yeah,
So,
100%. A scripture just popped in my head and I wish like I was better at like telling scripture stories because that's not my strong suit, but the man that needed to be healed, he's in his bed and Jesus heals him and Jesus says, "Take up your bed and walk." Like in other words, like have the faith that I did the thing and you take the first step, like take the action, like get up from your bed and walk. And I think about that so often because we do have to take the first step. And that's often the scariest. I think
yeah.
just saying yes and doing that first step is it takes some real courage.
Yes, it's so interesting you mentioned that story because I have this book that I read. It's like the 30 days or whatever, like it's I Declare with Joel Osteen. And
Oh yeah.
so today's message that I was reading was exactly about putting faith behind our actions, like actually taking massive action, taking that step. And he relays the story of the man who like insisted and found a way to put himself in front of Jesus so that he can then get up and then walk, right, and be healed and cured.
Yes.
And it's exactly that we don't believe it because all of the experiences in our life has taught us to not believe, right? We've seen all of the different ways. Oh, I tried this and I tried that and it didn't work and it didn't work and it didn't work. So
The
why would it work this
evidence.
time? That's right.
Yeah. What is that called when we like give ourselves the evidence for the thing? What's that called?
Yeah, it's a confirmation bias. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And that's exactly it, right? Like we see um the proof of it's easier for us to find the proof of the things of why it won't work out.
Mhm.
Because if you think from even an evolutionarily standpoint, when humans were first there, what we needed to do for survival, right? Like we're always trained to identify the things that are going to be a threat to our survival, to our existence. And so the same thing, we're going to look for all of those warning signs, right? Like if,
Yes.
you had a bad experience with somebody, whatever those traits might be, those are the things you're going to go looking out for in future relationships with other people, whether romantic, intimate, or otherwise. Like those are going to be like those, oh, well, that didn't work out the last time I did that. So I'm going to avoid that in the future. So even from like a human biology standpoint, that's how we're wired and we're trained. But it's also that the fact that you doubt your abilities means that the opposite of that is true. So David Bayer likes to talk about this on his podcast too. And it's like for every thought, the opposite thought can exist.
Yes.
Right. So for every thought of I won't be successful, the opposite also is an option to believe I will be successful. And you can then look
Exactly.
for confirmation bias to find the proof of all of the ways in your life that you have been successful. But it requires you to like become aware of this programming that's running right in our mind
Absolutely. Yeah.
and like press pause and then say, I'm going to challenge that thought and that belief. What is the opposite of that? Or what do I believe? Like what is actually possible or true? And what is the evidence to substantiate that? And maybe you
Yeah.
have to sometimes create some of that evidence. And maybe that's where more of the faith and the surrendering comes in, you
Yeah.
know. But we've all grown and progressed at something in our lives. I mean, we all learned how to walk, right? For the most part.
Exactly.
Well, most of us learned how to ride a bike or learned how to drive a car compared to the first time we ever stepped into one. So before you ever stepped into a car to sit down and start driving, of course you're going to say, well, I'm not a good driver. Sure. But over time, you became a better driver. We're not always good drivers. So there's even evidence in our own lives of the past, of the things that we have done about mundane things that weren't these big things, but at that time it seemed really big. That shows that we have been able to grow and learn and overcome, but it's the discomfort while we are learning that can be really hard to sit with because that's where you're going to fall down and you're going to get bruised and bumped and you're going to need to get up again and you need to keep going again. And I'm saying all of this like I've got it all figured out, but this is exactly the advice that I need for my own self in my own life right now too. So
Julie, don't you think we all need to just hear this every day? Because I'm sitting here, it like my insides are racing like in a good way. I'm so like excited about this conversation because well, first of all, it's exactly what I've been experiencing day in and day out, launching this podcast, right, for the last 12 weeks. And you're right, because, and not everybody takes the time to learn about mindset and the power of the mind. And I think that everything you said is so important because we are wired to stay safe. At the end of the day, like our brains just want us to stay safe. And so it's really funny. My podcast coach, Kathy Heller, she says, like, get out of your mind. Your mind is not going to help you. Like she literally says, there's nothing in your mind. Like get out of it and get in your heart because your heart is knows what it wants. Your heart is full of love and it's full of joy and it's full of acceptance. And it's like if we could just give ourselves like the same grace that we give other people, I mean, if you were chatting with your best friend and she said, "Oh no, I suck at this and I'm not good enough and I this and my that," and you'd be like, "Well, try again. Have you thought about it this way?" Or maybe, you learn about the 2 millimeter shift. Like so often, it's the tiniest thing that if you just tweak it, holy, ish, it works. And so I know you and I both did the board breaking thing at the Tony Robbins Unleash Your Power event. And for me, oh, you have it?
I do.
Show us.
Hold on, I got to put it together the right way. This is the stuff that I was breaking through. Fear of indecision, failure, messing up, no more what ifs.
And
every
what's
time.
on the other side? What did you break through to?
You might have to read it 'cause it's backwards for me.
So
Um,
you are resilient, gifted, powerful. It says, I will achieve my vision. Yes, girl. And change through love, which I love that, right? That's so like what we're talking about right now. So for me with the board, I used a 2 millimeter shift because I didn't break the board the first time and I didn't break the board the second time. I broke the board the third try because I had set it up wrong. Like literally, I had it, I don't know how I had it, but I had it like balanced in between two chairs and there wasn't enough support. So when I kept trying to go through it, it wouldn't break. And so it's so interesting that it broke when I just thought maybe I should just set it up differently. And imagine if I had have given up. What if I had have just been like, I'm not good enough. Like, I can't do it. I so
oh
easily
yeah,
could have let myself go there. And I was determined and I didn't, but it's just proof that our minds are usually out to attack us. They
yes,
really, I mean, or keep us safe. And I think back to your point, it's so uncomfortable to not feel safe, you
that's right.
know?
Yeah,
And what I've loved learning about lately is our nervous systems and how we have the ability to encourage our bodies to feel more safe every time we actually do take a step forward. So it sounds kind of silly, but I'm hugging myself all the time now because when I do something right or when I like push past a fear, I want to like remind myself that like you're safe and you did it and you did it once and like you can do it again.
I love that. I love that because I don't celebrate myself often enough. Like I often have somebody has to remind me, like my coach, my fiance would be like, "So did you celebrate? Like what was your win?" I was like, "What? I just did blah blah blah. It had to be done, so I did it." And I'm like, it's like, "Girl, wait." Like I celebrate my kids, but I don't celebrate myself, you know?
100%. I do know because you reminded me of one more story. So I took a video of myself breaking the board because I'm just like you. I didn't celebrate myself until lately, until I learned that that was important. And I showed my kids my board breaking video. And my son goes, Mommy, why didn't you like yay or like scream or like I did it? He goes, You didn't do anything. And I was like, yeah, it's like kind of a humbling, shameful moment that like he's right. I didn't even really celebrate it. I mean, I kind of did the next I think I took a picture or video and was like, "Yay, I did it." And he saw it and he laughed. I go, "Look here, here's my video." And he goes, "That's it?"
But doesn't it
Yay.
teach you, like, what we can learn from our kids about some things, right? Like, their resilience, their playfulness, their celebration, and we lose sight of that as an adult. We get so stuck in the grind, so stuck in the, "Well, it has to be done, so I've gotta do it, and therefore, what's the big deal about it? It's not a big deal." At least for me, like, I get stuck in that so
Yeah.
much. And then it just sucks the joy out of what you're doing. So part of my thing for me is to like have a little more fun in what I'm doing. Like, and that just feels really foreign because it's just on one hand, you're like, doctor, when you make a mistake, it's a patient's life that can be affected, right? So like the
Absolutely.
seriousness and the implications of a mistake are a lot bigger than something else.
Yeah.
I don't wanna say anything else to, like, put anything else down, but, like, it's not
Oh,
just,
no.
a wrong color paint or whatever it is, right? Like, this is, like, a serious life-threatening thing that
Yes.
can happen, and so it's starting to, like, I don't know, like, I feel I'm at this point in my life where, like, it's starting to shift into this more natural flow of being, like, tapping into that creative side. It's the part of me that comes alive when I'm not working, Like, I love to be in the kitchen and making some stuff to
You?
eat,
Yeah.
and I love to cook things, and so I've just been okay, you and I were talking on Friday, right? We were supposed to meet
Yeah.
originally a few days ago, and that day had its own plans.
Yeah.
So, after that morning and just the whole stuff that was going on in my house, I was like, "Fine, I need to get out of the house." Like, I took some time, calm down, whatever it was, and then I left, and I went to Half Price Books, and I got myself a coffee and whatever, and a really fluffy, crispy pastry croissant
Yes.
thing that had it was like a dulce de leche churro style thing.
Yummy.
It was like crumbs everywhere. Like, it was, I was like
Flaking all over you.
making all
Yes.
over,
The goodness.
but it was delicious, you know.
Yes.
And I never looked in the cookbook section. Like, it's been there and I've never looked at it. And I'm one of
Really?
these that, like
Yeah.
I'm one of these cooks that, I just make things. I'll find things online if I want to try a new recipe. I've got a
Yeah.
pantry stocked with whatever, and I'll just go in, pull stuff out, and I can just make things, right? I'm probably the only
Yeah.
person in the house who cooks any of the vegetables that we own, you know?
Same. Yes.
Hey,
Yeah. I cook like you too. Yeah. You know the basics, so you get creative and you just kind of whip it up.
that's
I
right.
love to be in that flow too. It's like I
Yeah,
hate cooking if I have to cook, but like, mom,
yeah,
make dinner again. And I'm like, not again. But when I'm in the flow and I'm like, I feel like cooking, then that's a whole nother, like, it brings me joy.
totally
It's so
different.
creative
Yeah.
and
And
beautiful. The
so
colors and
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. The new flavors, you're like, let's try something different. You get a little dopamine hit from a positive thing instead of like the doom
Yeah.
scrolling dopamine hit. Um, so it was just great because I'm sitting there,
Aw.
I picked up a cookbook, and as I'm drinking my coffee and like eating this flaky croissant, I'm like flipping through this cookbook, and I can just feel like angel sounds harmonizing inside me, like, oh, like just it's that feeling of resonance with what is like your calling, where you
Yes.
are meant to go. And sometimes we over identify with who we have been, that to step into who we might become
Hmm.
can be really hard, and we overthink it and overanalyze it to death. And it goes back to well, what is safe is what I'm familiar with, even if it sucks, even if it's
Yeah.
not working
Even
for
if it
me.
sucks.
We
Yes.
stay in it because we know it.
Oh my gosh. So good. Yes.
And so, like, being there with this cookbook, I've never felt that alive before with just a cookbook in front of me.
I love
And
this.
I'm like coming up with ideas and thinking about this my own project that I now want to take on. And I've been thinking about this whole culinary medicine and lifestyle medicine movement and food as
Wow.
medicine, and thinking about the food that we have and how to get more in touch with what is organic, not organic
Yes.
like organically grown, but like what is like earthy, right? And being in touch with that, and what our lives could look like if we started to, and I keep doing this with my hands because it's like this movement, right? Like it's this
It is.
this
Oh, it's
flow, like
everything.
the turning of butter or the stirring of soup or stuffing. But it's this flow that we come into. And when we start to honor that, and we
Mm.
honor that in our lives, and we honor that in our bodies, and we honor that in our minds, and we honor that in the seasons of life in a year, and then the seasons of life across the years, it's giving me chills right now. Imagine
Dude, I'm
our
like,
lives are
preach.
different.
Yes.
And like
Yes.
this
Girl, 100%. Because when I am sitting here just soaking up God's goodness, I'm like, He created the earth exactly as He did for a reason. It's not a secret that there's plentiful, like beautiful fruits and veggies everywhere. And they're meant to be like fuel for our bodies to give us the nourishment that we need. And we're over here like filling our bodies full of this toxic crap when like he had the perfect plan for us and everything we need is like out there. And it just like God's design for our life is so purposeful. And it's
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
it's so it's all aligned. The wellness, the mind, the body, it's all meant to be fed and it's all interconnected. And yeah, this is everything.
I'm like, if we were meant to eat Cheetos, Cheetos would come on a tree. I
Thank
mean, they're
you.
great and delicious. Don't
They
get me
are.
wrong, but like they are chemically manufactured that way to purposefully get that response out of you, right? Like, I mean, don't
Ew.
get me wrong, I do eat Cheetos every now and then, like every now and then. And then I'm like, okay, that's good. Like, let's move on to something else, like those pears that I bought or whatever it is. So I don't know. I
Well, I
think it's just
had a handful of Cheetos last night, like right before I cooked dinner, and my kids absolutely like picked those for their lunch today.
right.
Like, yes,
It's okay. I've got a box of
I know.
snacks here. Like, granted, right? But I
Yeah.
just I just think that like we have gotten so out of touch with our natural rhythms and cycles in a day, in a month, in a year, within ourselves even and within our lives. And then we think about how that then spills out into everything. You have basically this big honking engine of people on earth who are all beating to the beat of their own drum, which is all incredibly out of tune and out of sync. And then we wonder why there's so much dysfunction and disharmony and discord
Yeah.
all around us
Yeah.
because we're not honoring what is true, right? Like,
Absolutely. Yeah. The truth, the beauty, and the goodness. Yeah. It's here for the taking. And it's here for everyone. It's just a matter of choosing it every day.
right. I went back to Half Price Books on Sunday,
Did you?
um, and bought 3 cookbooks.
For you. That story gave me so much joy because like in my years of stay-at-home mom land, I never did anything for me, and I feel like I was just like dying the whole time. And so one year, my brother, was lucky enough to have him like live in the same state as him because we didn't have any family or friend support for so many years. So I was like isolated. So I finally moved near my family, and my brother's so sweet. He's so giving, and he's like, "Hey, Ash, I got you. Like, what do you want to do for your birthday?" And I was like, I just wanna be alone. Like, take my kids and, like, let me just be alone. And my happy place is Barnes& and Noble, and because my birthday is November, I always, like, get a slice of cheesecake because they have a little Starbucks cafe in there and or a cheesecake factory like part thing in the Starbucks. So I get my cheesecake, I get my coffee, and I sit there and I look at the journals and I look at the books and I just like soak in like all of that goodness and I just like I could just live there for hours and just sit on the floor like with my knees folded and just like look at books all day and, look at, like, how lit up we are talking about this. Like, this is where it's at, folks. It's
That's
like
right.
the
That's right.
beauty of life is in the joy. Like, seek the joy. Whatever lights you up, it's like pay attention to it because it's usually
Absolutely.
these tiny things, little things. And we go, "Oh my God, I forgot how good that makes me feel."
Yes. Absolutely. And something that I do with my coaching clients is like it's following your energy, right? Notice your energy. And when people
Yes.
say like do what makes you happy, okay, or follow your passion, sometimes that sounds so cliche. People are like, I don't know what I don't know what that means.
Right.
I don't know where I start. It's what are the things that light you up inside? What are the things that you lose track of time, right? And I'm not talking about like binge watching Netflix. I'm talking about like, Truly, the true joyful losing track of time, whether that's something creative, artwork, physical, outdoors, whatever it might be, and following that and putting that in your life. And so when we went back to Barnes and Noble on Sunday, and it was like, had an hour or two, we were supposed to go to church. Our church stuff is in the afternoon. Kids had their classes and stuff like that. Everything was just all like turmoil and spilling over. I woke up Sunday morning so grumpy that Sunday and
Was me
irritable.
yesterday.
Yes. So grumpy and irritable.
Yes.
And John is like, what's going on? And I'm thinking, do I even open this can of worms? Because if I start, he's going to start fixing things. And the last thing that I want right now is anybody to sit here and try to fix anything. I just want somebody to be here with me. Right.
Yes.
So bless them, thankful for them, but
I
sometimes
know.
just keep it in, right?
You
Like, I
don't
don't want to
gotta
hear
fix it. Yes.
it. And so all over the place. And so anyway, ended up going to Half Price Books, and I had found this journal that just like stirred something up inside me. And it was like one of these prompted journals, and it was different than the regular prompted journals. It felt very artistic, and it had this like vintage feel to it, right? And
Yeah.
I picked it up and I put it in my car in my basket. And so he and I are sitting and just like I was showing him all the things I picked up. He was showing me all the things he picked up. And I come to this journal and I said, when I touched this journal, it just made me feel like I want to. And I just stopped talking because I could tell I was on the verge of tears. And I talk about all the other stuff I picked up, and then he brings me back to the journal. Okay. And like,
Really?
why were you getting emotional about the journal? And I said,
Aw.
because I want to have like an hour a day where I just can sit and write. And it's not even just sitting and writing as opposed to that. It's this energy that you create around you, right? The experience of having that cup of something warm to drink, whatever it might be, and having, let's say, the nice music playing, even with like the beautiful scenery on the TV, all those YouTube videos that you can like play and whatever. And it's like the ambiance. And it signifies to me that it's like taking the time to slow down.
Yes.
And I felt like life gets so rushed and hectic, and whether it's work stuff or side hustle stuff or kid stuff or relate, like whatever it is, everything else ends up taking priority. And so just even talking about that was making me tearful and emotional because I felt like if I keep going this way, it's something that I'll never have. So what's the point of even getting this journal? Because it's just going to make me feel sad every time I look at it, because it's going to
Aw.
remind me of all the ways, the things that
What
I'm
I'm
not
not
doing.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I bought the journal anyway. And so, so
Yay.
I'm like, we're going to do this.
Step
Step
one.
one. And, you know, he's been partnering with me to be like, when are you going to take that 1 hour of time for yourself?
Really?
And I get in my own way. I'm like, yeah, but I have this and I have that and I have this and I have that.
Oh, he sounds like a gem if you ask me. So he's
So,
encouraging you to use the journal.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that ties in with like how we can create our, like, how we can, like, what are the practical things here, right? Like, how do we create our schedule, our week, plan things out so the things that are important to us are actually slotted in with intention and not left to, if after all this stuff is done, then this will happen. Because that is what happens all the time, right? We, for
Yeah.
ourselves, for our
Yeah.
family, whatever it is, we leave the fun stuff and the important stuff and, especially around holiday time, holiday memories and whatnot, we leave all that, when everything else is done, then we'll do this. But it's really, we need to flip that on its head because it's
We
like you
do.
said, that's where the joy is. So if you looked at, let's say, a blank calendar for the week that's got all the times slotted out, right? Whatever,
Yes.
30-minute time slots. Schedule in there the things that are important to you. your health appointments, like I have a mammogram scheduled for this week, or whether it's to go see some holiday lights or some family thing that you want to do together or your own quiet time, whatever it might be,
Excellent.
schedule those things in first
Yeah.
and then let everything else take whatever room that's left.
That's beautiful. I agree that self-care, if you want to chalk it up to that, should be just as important as an appointment with a client that's gonna, put some money in the bank. But we're talking about, the wealth in terms of the person we are and how important it is to honor our needs, our human and emotional needs. And so, yeah, it's devastating to go into burnout only so that we can stay on the hamster wheel and keep up with these lives we've created for ourselves. So that's wonderful strategic advice. I love that idea. And I'm going to do more of that. I'm good at, well, I've been good lately at, I do try to wake up at least 15 minutes before my kids and at least get my prayer time in. I try to, pray. I try to renew my mind in some scripture. And then I also try to do an act of gratitude so that I really do start my day coming from like a heart centered place. Um, and that really does help me, but I think I could use more time making sure I do these things that bring me joy, or like scheduling them in, like you say.
And I'm terrible at personal accountability. Like
Me too.
if I don't have external accountability, I'm terrible. So there's this book. I have so one of my things, I have lots of books. I read them in little chunks and pieces here and there. It's very seldom that I sometimes take a book and like read it all the way through, not for novels, but for like all these personal development and growth books.
Yeah.
And so there's this book called The Four Tendencies. It's by Gretchen Rubin.
Okay.
And it talks about how the obligers are the people who have external accountability. Like they do things if someone has asked them to, they know they're going to show up if somebody else, but they lack internal accountability. Then there's the upholders. These are the ones who um, they're going to do it and get it done no matter what, right? Like the people who make the list and they check
Check it
themselves off on
twice.
that list.
Yeah.
And then there's, I forget the names for some of these other ones, but there's people who have to be convinced of why they need to
Oh
do
man.
something before they do it. And then there's the rebels who are like, I don't care what you tell me, I'm going to do what I want. Like it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
you know? And understanding maybe a bit about how people operate and their
Mm,
personality in this regard could be helpful because, if you're somebody, and I think a lot of women might be the kind where external accountability is great and then internal accountability not so great. Some are better
yeah.
at it than others.
Yeah.
It might help you to learn how to partner up with someone so that you can then achieve whatever goal it is or that self-care time or whatever it is that's important to you. But having somebody partnered with you on that same journey can be really
Yeah.
helpful. Like, so me having my fiance tell me, like, this is really important. So, him saying, when are you going to take this time for yourself? You know, it can be really helpful because otherwise, if it was me and with ADHD, out of sight, out of mind, I'm not even
Me
thinking about
too.
it. And then he brings it up, and then it's like, oh, yeah, I wanted to do that. Let me make time to do that. So it's how you
Yeah.
can even enlist the help of those around you to show up as the best version of you for the things that are important to you
That's
so you
great.
can be you.
Love it. That's awesome advice. I want to check that book out because I love geeking out on all that stuff. And I think it would be really interesting to know, how people are wired and what motivates them to want to take action.
And you may see your kids' personalities coming up. Like there's the one kid who's gonna make that checklist and do things, and then there's the other who's gonna be like, "Why? Why do I have to do this? What's the point of it?" Like,
I
and
think I'm
so
that Y
you're the
person.
one. And so for yourself, but like it
Yeah,
comes down to you're absolutely right. Like the internal accountability, but the internal validation
yeah,
and doing it for yourself, or even the future version of you,
yeah.
right?
I
And
love that.
there's a book. book- I have
I
read this
love
one.
it.
It's by Don Miguel Ruiz. It's the Four Agreements, right? And one of
Yes.
the first one in there was be impeccable with your word. And we often think that that could mean how I am with regards to what I say or promise others, but it's also being impeccable with ourselves, right? The word to ourselves. And are we being truthful and honest to ourselves? And sometimes, there's limiting beliefs that get in the way. Maybe sometimes we adopt things or feel we need to do things because it's expected of us, but we don't really feel we want to. And so
Yeah,
sometimes it's an opportunity to even explore like maybe that, maybe like let's say it's exercise, right? Exercising every day. And maybe you're like, well, I need to exercise, and if I don't exercise, then it must mean this about me, and maybe it means that I'm lazy and I'm terrible and I have no discipline and all of these things, right? So one, we need to detach from those interpretations of it,
yeah,
because not exercising does not necessarily mean that. Um,
right.
but if you then take your calendar, this open calendar, and you don't actually slot out any time to exercise, then maybe exercise, as it is labeled as such, is not as important to you as you are trying to convince yourself to
Yeah,
believe that it should be important to you.
sure.
Right? Because at
Yeah.
that point, you don't have the excuse of I didn't have time. You're like, no, 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 look, we have an empty calendar here. So you got all the time in the world. So if you're not putting it on there, it must not be important to you. And that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And then I'm even going deeper for somebody who has maybe struggled with their self-worth. They may not even think that they're worthy of making time for themselves because they feel like they're pulled in so many areas and that they need to be putting the fires out and saving all the people. That's me speaking from my like recovering codependency mindset, you
Yeah.
know? So I think that's the most rewarding parts of this journey of becoming like your best self is because you finally get to make your needs a priority. And that's really a reflection of true self-love is when you go, hey, my needs do matter. And like I am worthy of stopping work an hour early so I can show up for myself. You know, that's self-love.
So true. And there are so many ways that, like, whether it's our cultural backgrounds, society, like expectations, that we lose that sense of self-worth, or what does it mean for me to show up with my needs and be seen for that and be loved for that and be accepted for that and welcomed for that and cherished and celebrated, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a gradation. But if we keep thinking we're going to wait for somebody else to give that to us in order to get to that point, you're going
Yeah.
to be waiting a long time.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right. Like, why would someone celebrate you if you don't even celebrate you? Right? We've probably can look back to our younger days and think about relationships that we were in which we were seeking out that love and validation from that
Yeah.
romantic partner, thinking that, like, oh, well, if they love me, that must mean that I'm worthy of something. And
Right.
that, oh, they broke up with me, I guess I'm not. Right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
if we are hinging our definition of self on other people, well, then it's going to be a rocky ride, right? It's going to be an up and down boat ride. And at the end of that ride, you will be no closer. If anything, you will be worse off than you were at the beginning of that ride.
Yeah.
So if we don't know who we are and define that for ourselves, the world will try to do that for you. And that comes down to
Absolutely.
this core of self-love and who am I? Yeah, you started out saying, who is Julie? Who
Uh,
am I?
yeah.
What is important to me? What is not important to me?
Yeah.
Like there
Yeah.
are things that are important. It could be important to somebody in your life, but it may not be important to you, and that's okay. But it comes down to this self-love that we need to ask ourselves, and you kind of gave this example that if it was your best friend, you would say, hey, it's okay. Like if you had a crap day and things didn't turn out as planned or whatever, like I still love you and I'm here for you. Do we
Yeah.
say that to ourselves or do we beat ourselves up? So like
Mm-hmm.
that negative self-talk that comes in, and we think that, oh, it's okay, I just do it to myself, it makes me a better person. The answer is wrong, not true. And I can guarantee you, because I've seen this happen, it spills out into all of your other relationships. And if you don't want to do it for yourself, then do it for those that you love. Because if you don't have self love for yourself, and if the first thing that pops in when you mess up or don't do something are words of judgment and criticism, then that is the first thing that's going to come out with your kids, with
Yeah.
your partner, with anybody else that you interface. And that criticism might be masked in a loving way, like, oh, hey, kid, your buttons are all off. But if that's the first thing that comes out of your mouth, then what you are seeing is what they did wrong and not what they did right.
Aw.
And
Yeah.
these are things that I am learning the hard way, right? Like I grew up in a house, like there wasn't a lot of praise. There was love, but it wasn't a generation of like praising you and lavishly praising, right? Like, now we're in the everyone gets a trophy generation, but those were the decades of no,
Yeah.
you don't get a trophy unless you earned it, right? Like,
Uh-huh. Exactly.
so, but like I have had to learn, and this is something I'm still learning, is how to give positive affirmation to myself,
Yeah.
to others around me. And I'm motivated to learn how to do this because I don't want my kids, they beat themselves up over things. And so now I'm sitting there trying to coach them out of that thinking,
Wow.
saying that your brain believes everything that it says. And if you go around your day saying, I had a bad day and I messed up on that test, how are you going to perform, let's say, on the next test, since we're in final exam season, compared to if you go around telling yourself, that's okay. I got things wrong that I was hoping I wouldn't have gotten wrong. I didn't do as well as I would have liked, but that's okay. It's a learning experience and I'm trying and I'm growing. And how do you think you're going to then perform on the next test? Right. So
Right.
your mindset and the words that you choose are so highly pivotal and influential on whether you take that next step and the energy you bring with yourself into that next step.
I couldn't agree more. And what I would love to do before we wrap up is have you give us like a very legitimate example of this, because I was having a very similar conversation with a friend on the phone the other day, and she's guilty of doing like, lots of negative self-talk. And she said, but what do I say instead? Like it's such a negative spiral, that she doesn't know. Like, so can you give us an example? Let's say somebody would say like, God, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I messed up again. So what should we say instead of that?
Yeah. Um, so I think the first step is awareness, right? Like becoming aware that this dialogue is there, becoming aware of this like critical voice that's coming out on the side and commenting.
Yeah.
Okay. That's like the judge within us. Okay. Then the second part of it is, so that's like the awareness and then acknowledging, right? So I acknowledge that there's this voice there. And
Mm.
I accept, like, did I mess up? Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. Maybe that was an exaggerated statement, right? So I think even pausing there, calming down, taking a step back, looking at the situation objectively and saying, did I truly mess up? Okay. Did this turn out the way I hoped, right? So what does that mean? When somebody says I messed up, that means that the outcome was not what I was expecting. Right? In my mind, I had a vision. Let's just say you're baking one of these cakes, right? We see these memes or these funny videos all the time of like what the picture of that cake looks like and then what the
Yeah,
actual
the
cake looks
actual
like. Okay. And now it's
yeah.
funny and we laugh about it, but it's not always funny in that moment when you have a party starting in 2 hours
Yeah.
and this is supposed to be the cake for your kid's fifth birthday and everyone's showing up, right? So it's not funny at that time. But it's there's a mismatch of expectation to what actually happened in reality. Okay.
Yeah.
What we have to do at that time is honestly, I think it's like taking a moment and pausing and reframing and say, I am working on getting better at. Like,
Yes.
I have a video I recorded yesterday, I launched it or whatever. Let's just say nobody watches it.
Right.
Did I mess up? Did I say something wrong? Was it too long? Was it whatever? I don't know, right? I'm
Yeah.
working on getting better at. I'm working on learning how to do XYZ. So it shifts it from this fixed mindset to this growth mindset.
I like that.
And when you say, I am working on,
Mhm.
that's exactly what that is, right? Because it's showing you that you don't just go and do something once and become the expert at it, but it's this gradual process of getting better at something.
Yeah.
I am working on recognizing that I have negative self talk. I am working on understanding why I speak to myself that way. I am working on learning how to be kinder to myself. Because we don't just wake up and arrive at our destination.
Right.
Even when we think we have arrived, the journey is still ongoing, right? Like we think that we're going to wake up one day and I'm going to be like, nothing bothers me and everything is in flow and all of it is perfect. Like
Yeah.
everyone does what they're supposed to do and the money just keeps pouring in. And maybe that happens, but it's thinking about even when I get to that point, the journey is still ongoing. It's like when you eat a meal. Imagine Thanksgiving dinner, right? You eat Thanksgiving dinner, you're like, "Oh my god, I'll never eat again. I'm so full."
Right, right.
Breakfast time comes the next day, you're thinking about what you're gonna make with those Thanksgiving leftovers, right? So, like, this is how we are in our lives, that when we think there's a certain way we want to be, even when we have arrived at that,
Yeah.
there is still ongoing development. So it's like this arrival fallacy that when we reach that goal that we're going to feel like, "Oh, I'm good." Well, when has that ever happened?
Yeah.
Even people
Yeah.
who retire, they then find something else to do. Like,
Yeah, it's true. And I think that's kind of why it's so important to look at life as a journey. I mean, we hear that a lot, but it's like, it's about, I think it's about being detached from the outcome. It's not so much about, what is this going to look like in the end, but like, where am I on the journey and giving yourself the grace to take a step forward even if you do it wrong and you be willing to learn from that, to look back and say like what could I have done differently. So like even though I feel stupid, I made a mistake, I am learning, right?
yeah,
So it's that even though, and then it's
right.
but I'm this, or yeah,
If
so
if you wouldn't say it to your child, because this is I turn it back on my kids now. They say things to themselves. I'm like, would you say that to me if I was stressed and I messed up?
oh
Would you tell me that I screwed up? They're like, no. Well, then why do you say that to yourself?
Yeah.
And when I was working with a therapist earlier on, like these are those automatic negative thoughts, right? Ants, ANTS. I literally had the notes app on my phone open. And
Okay.
every time I noticed a critical thought come in, I put the emoji of the ant. And I did this day by day by day. So, like,
Did
literally, right?
you?
Like, whatever today's date. And you stick an ant for every single negative thought that comes into your mind. You will be
Wow.
surprised at how many you registered of the ones you even were aware of, recognizing
Yeah.
that probably for every one that you were aware of, there was probably a whole lot more that you were not aware of. And you're like, holy moly, you know, that voice that is trying to keep you safe by saying, why would you want to try and put yourself out there? Just stick with what you know. Isn't life comfortable and good for you right now?
Yeah.
You have a home, you have food, you have a family. What more do you need? Why would you try to take on something new? You have no idea how that's going to turn out. You might fail at it. No one may listen. I mean, you could go on and on and
On and
on.
on. You're right. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you're like, okay, voice, shut up.
Yeah.
I love you. You are trying to keep me safe.
For
So these
sure.
negative voices that come, we don't want to alienate them because they were there and they developed as a way of keeping us safe. So
Yeah.
partner with you are there. I understand you are there to keep me safe. Me taking this new step forward in this venture of mine is making you anxious. You will be safe. You'll be fine. And I love you. And we are going to grow and we are going to move forward together. And we're going to show that this is something that can be done and we're going to be okay. And talk to yourself that way. We're going to
Yeah.
be fine. We're going to be
Absolutely.
okay. We
Yeah.
are learning. We are growing. We are evolving. No, I don't have it all figured out. My biggest thing in the Dickens process that we did at UPW was needing to have it all figured out, feeling like I have to have it all figured out. And I
Yes.
struggled with what I needed to write in that instead of that. And the only thing
Mm.
I could think of and come up with was that God hasn't figured out. My job is to just take a step.
Sure. Yeah. Seek him and let him do the work. Yeah. Um, I once attended a women's conference at my church, and it was, so full of really powerful women of God, women of faith on the stage. And one said, she said, pray specifically to God. I mean, about your day. Like, I'm having a meeting with so and so, God. Like, what do you want me to say? Or like, what, you know what I mean? Because he really does go before us. And if you really have that much faith, it's like, if you just trust him and take one step at a time, he'll show you which way to go. You'll feel conviction in your spirit, like this feels right or this feels wrong or like this feels uneasy. And then you can check in with yourself. Is it my own fears holding me back, or is it God telling me like that don't go that way? And so I think that pinpoints the importance of having a relationship with God, because he's like, he'll do it for us. He takes care of it all. We just really do have to trust him and be willing to seek him and be still and quiet enough to hear that voice. So I loved every part of our conversation, Julie. Like, it's so full circle and on so many points. I cannot wait to put this out in the world. I just couldn't love this enough. And I think you've offered a lot of inspiration and also a lot of wisdom. I think this was extremely informative and something women can really run with when they're struggling. So I think there's so many beautiful gifts that we can give ourselves as a result of this conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I really thank you so much for having the opportunity to be able to be here.
Yeah.
It also helps me to realize this wisdom is buried within me and needs to be shared as well, right? Because as I'm trying to
Yes.
be like, I need to put myself out there, and thinking, oh, well, what do I have to say? What does anybody want to hear? Anything, like the voices are there.
Yeah,
No
they're
matter who we
there.
are, the voices are there. It's what we do with them and whether we let them have the final say or not,
It's true, and they
Um,
never really go away, which is the sad part. Even very successful podcasters have said that voice doesn't go away. It's just once you do it enough, your nervous system like trusts that you can do the thing because you've proven to it you can do the thing. So before we go, I would love for people to be able to connect with you. How can we learn more about your coaching? Like, where do we go on social media to find you?
Sure. I am on Facebook at Julie Trivedi. I am on Instagram at Julie Trivedi. I'm on LinkedIn, same thing.
Perfect.
My own coaching website is julietrivedimd.com. Well, I think
Yes.
my Facebook profile might have some of these links listed in there, but I'm on Substack. I do like to write. I have a Substack blog, whatever you call it, subscription called The Daily Epiphany. I have not always been posting daily. Doesn't mean that there aren't epiphanies. It's been more about getting around to doing things. My email is julietrivedimd@gmail.com. So everything is Julie Trivedi and Julie Trivedi MD. That's me. Find me on any channel. I like to write. My website has a section called Reflections where I've put some blog posts and I've shifted some of those over to my Substack, but I primarily post in my Substack now, where you can get an email every time I post something. And I have, free subscription, so you don't have to pay unless you wish to.
That's wonderful. Yay. So we can follow you and keep up with all these good insights you have for us, all this wisdom. Okay, the
Absolutely.
wonderful Julie Trivedi. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Ashley. It's been lovely. And I wish you all the best in all these other podcasts that you're doing too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, thank you for listening. If you got something out of this episode, be sure to follow or subscribe to Her Identity Project on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure you're notified about new episodes. Please hit the like, the share buttons, get on social media, spread the word. Please take time to leave me a review. That would mean more to me than you could ever know, and it helps get eyes on this show so that other people can just get all the goodness out of it. If you're loving it, please hit me up in my DMs. I absolutely want to hear your feedback. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.